up into the 60s and 70s and still continues. I've seen things about President Obama that were horrible.
I think people who go to the Jim Crow Museum are often surprised when they see something from 2015 as racist as many of the things from 100 years ago. And we've had friends who are a complete mess after they've left because suddenly they've been confronted with the truth.
For many years when I traveled, I would say that the United States, despite this history of enslavement and Jim Crow, that we are today more democratic and more egalitarian than we've ever been. And I stopped saying that about 2 years ago. I'm not suggesting that we are back in the Jim Crow period. Don't get it twisted. It's not like that. But what I am saying is I hear and see a level of racist rhetoric that is reminiscent of when I was growing up in Alabama under Governor George Wallace. People say they don't want to talk about race, but they're doing it all the time. But they're not talking about it in places where their ideas can be challenged.
As we focus on what took place 2 years ago that had changed the gentleman's focus about his mindset about black folks in America and the issue of race. You're listening to Howcee Productions Gospel Blog Talk Radio as we continue discussing your mindset about black folks in America. The awesome challenge what faces what you might say the mindset of black folks in America. What is it really like? You can't even talk in your own voice. You can't even tell other people how they sound. They may be white, they may be black, they may be using their white voice. But that is the elements of where we are in this country we call America. And the situation of black folks in America.
Correct. Turns out Americans are pretty good at guessing your race just by hearing your voice. It's called linguistic profiling, and we all do it. There are certain auditory cues that give us subtle hints about who we're talking to. A lot of black Americans speak what's referred to as AAVE, or African American Vernacular English.
AAV is non-rhotic, meaning that, like a British accent, there are no R sounds at the end of words or at the end of syllables.
John Fleming is a speech and dialect coach for movies and video games.
Generally speaking, there's the TH sounds, the th and the get replaced with something, generally a T or a D. There's a few other vowels and things, but it kind of keeps going, and it gets kind of into the weeds a bit.
When it comes to being on the phone, though, black people will often try to sound more white.
Yes, Mr. Ribbon, I would love to have the opportunity to sit with you to discuss some of our products.
It's a form of code switching, or in this case, alternating between two different dialects.
These trying to grab me by my collar, right? That's not... good morning, customer service. My name is Philip.
Black people talking white is having a real moment in media right now. Sorry to Bother You is a movie about a black salesman whose career only takes off when he starts talking white.
You want to make some money here? Use your white voice.
Hey, Mr. Kramer, this is Langston from Regal View.
And Black Klansman is a movie about a black detective who infiltrates the KKK by pretending to be white over the phone.
God bless white America.
The idea is to speak in what's called the standard accent.
The standard accent is the one spoken by the majority group or the socially advantaged group.
Olivia Kang is a psychologist at Harvard. She's working on a project that explores the hidden biases we hold.
If you speak with the standard accent, you're judged as being more intelligent, more competent, more credible, more hireable. Now having a regional accent or a non-standard accent, now you're not getting those advantages. You're seen as less credible or less hireable.
These biases are implicit. This isn't Charlottesville tiki torch racism. It's much more discreet than that.
The most basic way of understanding implicit bias is by thinking about the associations we make. If two things occur together over and over again in our experience, we link them together.
Salt and pepper, day and night, bread and butter. These types of associations are helpful, but there are some that aren't. Now, if I say the word genius, you're probably thinking of some collector's edition white dude. Now, if I say the word criminal...
Voices aren't just sounds. In a lot of ways, they're auditory faces. So when you hear a voice, you can, in some sense, piece together what the person on the other end of the phone can look like, roughly how old they are, their gender, where they come from. But the interesting thing is that you can also form impressions about character. So how intelligent someone is, how competent, how likable, how trustworthy. And these impressions can be flawed, right? A lot of these things might have a basis in your implicit biases or things that you've heard, portrayals you've seen on television. And so when people are doing something like conducting a voice interview, often the implicit biases they have about voice can influence the decisions that they're making.
Every black American is bilingual. We speak street vernacular and we speak job interview.
In order to combat some of these implicit biases, black people, myself included, try to sound as white as possible. I sound like Bill Gates impersonating your mailman. Why, hello there. I'm wondering if there are any positions available. Oh no, I don't mind waiting. But does changing your voice actually work? A study in 2001 found that landlords would make racist snap judgments to callers with certain dialects. Compared with whites, blacks were less likely to get callbacks, less likely to be told there was an apartment available, and more likely to get their credit questioned. However, blacks who code switched fared better than those who didn't. Code switching helps in other areas too.
And actually, Don Lemon is a very good example, because to become this main host that he is, he's talked about how he had to change, because he's from New Orleans, and he consciously had to change his accent for the sake of moving up at CNN.
The President of the United States is racist.
Instead of changing the way we speak, maybe we should change the way we listen. I might be able to tell your race from your voice, but that doesn't tell me anything about your character.
Moving ahead, what is it about? In the old days, as they say, the Negro in America. Martin Luther King explains it this way to an NBC.
What is it about the Negro? I mean, every other group that came as an immigrant somehow, not easily, but somehow got around it. Is it just the fact that Negroes are black?
White America must see that no other ethnic group has been a slave on American soil. That is one thing that other immigrant groups haven't had to face. The other thing is that the color became a stigma. American society made the Negro's color a stigma. America freed the slaves in 1863 through the Emancipation Proclamation of Abraham Lincoln, but gave the slaves no land or nothing in reality, and as a matter of fact, to get started on. At the same time, America was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and the Midwest, which meant that there was a willingness to give the white peasants from Europe an economic base. And yet it refused to give its black peasants from Africa, who came here involuntarily in chains and had worked free for 244 years, any kind of economic base. And so emancipation for the Negro was really freedom to hunger. It was freedom to the winds and rains of heaven. It was freedom without food to eat or land to cultivate, and therefore it was freedom and famine at the same time. And when white Americans tell the Negro to lift himself by his own bootstraps, they don't look over the legacy of slavery and segregation. I believe we ought to do all we can and seek to lift ourselves by our own bootstraps, but it's a cruel jest to say to a bootless man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps. And many Negroes, by the thousands and millions, have been left bootless as a result of all of these years of oppression and as a result of a society that deliberately made his color a stigma and something worthless and degrading.
Again, the question, what is your mindset about black folks?